Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. A few weeks ago, Marcus emailed me and asked if I could create a video about my tips for pairing type. I thought it was a great idea, so even though pairing type is kind of an in-depth subject, this week I want to focus on 3 simple tips, kind of a basic overview of my favorite tips for pairing type. So we're just going to jump right in to those tips. So number 1 is applying contrast. And contrast can be applied in a bunch of different ways when you're pairing type. But the reason why contrast is important is because it helps to direct the viewer in the order you'd like them to read, providing a balanced reading hierarchy. So we want a very balanced layout, but we also want to have type choices when they're paired together that create contrast between one another, so it's a more balanced and pleasant reading experience, knowing where you should go first and second and so on. So contrast can be achieved through scale is number 1, and I've got a couple of examples of each one of these so you can kind of begin thinking in your mind how you'd like to pair your own type. So with scale, you can see we've got very similar fonts here that are paired together, but with scale, between the two, you're getting a better layout and they pair very well together because we've got one that's very large compared to one that's definitely smaller, so you know what's most important. If you have two that are too similar, they're both competing for attention from your eye, so your eye isn't sure which to read first or second or what's more important than the other. So scale is very, very important for the layout's sake and also for the type pairing sake as well. So the next one is type weight. So having contrast between the weights of your type choices is going to also improve that readability within a layout. With all of these examples, the first place your eyes are going is to the text that has the most weight in it. So even if the type is very common or very much a similar style, you're still going to be directed in the right order by utilizing weight and contrast with those type pairings. So the next one is style. And by style, I mean serif, sans serif, display, decorative, script, all those different types of styles. And it's really important that when you're pairing different types of styles that there's contrast between them. So right here with these examples in the top left, this Botrin and Company, you can see we've got a whole bunch of different type pairings here. We've got serif, sans serif, there's even a little bit of script there, but you can see it's utilizing scale and style to achieve contrast and a great layout that's very readable and feels very balanced despite there being so many different styles involved. And below you can see we've got a serif, a sans serif, and even a signage style typography with the hot beef at the bottom, but your eyes are going in all the right places right here, and all of these type pairings feel very harmonious because there's a lot of contrast between them. Once again, we don't have any two styles that are so similar that they're beginning to compete with your eye and where it should go. And then finally, this barber and tattoo business card right up at the top right, you definitely notice the name of the shop before anything else because we've got the contrast with the scale and with all the different, we've got sans serif, serif, and script once again right here. The scale helps you to see what you should see first, but everything feels very harmonious because there's a lot of contrast between the styles that are implemented. Okay. The next one is color, and actually color is a really great way to introduce contrast when you're using type pairings that are similar. So if you have a client that just demands similar typefaces, it's really important to create contrast so your layout is still balanced and harmonious. So when you're working with color, generally speaking, anything that's really dark or in high contrast to the background color is going to be noticed first versus light or faded colors, which will be seen second or third or last. With Russ and Daughters, you can see it's bold and it's black. The scale is the largest, so you're definitely going there first. But with all the different categories of food right here, you know exactly where to read from with whatever type of category you're looking for lunch, for example, because it's dictated in blue. So we've got a nice amount of contrast between our headline and even the different typefaces throughout that menu. So below you can see at the bottom left, strawberry one is very similar in scale to the rest of the typography right there, but because they've integrated color with strawberry, you're definitely going to go there first to know that everything that's below it is related to that flavor. And then finally, the Neon Museum, even though the background is dark blue, because the text is white, it's creating more contrast, so you know to read there first versus the lighter blue that's more similar to the background color. So that one has a lot of really similar type pairings as far as style goes, but enough contrast is achieved where it's a more harmonious pairing because we've got that contrast still existing with the color. So for the next one, shape. So shape is really fun because it adds a lot of dynamism throughout your layout. There's more energy throughout it when you integrate shapes. So with the top one, the candle, a lot of the fonts on that candle are very similar, but you're still getting a good layout and it still feels cohesive because we've got that arc right there that really draws your eye in, tells it where to go first, second, and third, and our scale is really helpful with the type pairing as well. So the top right one has a lot of curved text, so it's pretty fun to read, but you can see they've utilized scale to direct us where to go, but still made it interesting by changing up the different shapes, even though many of the typefaces that are used right here and that are paired are very similar. And then at the bottom, you can just see a couple more examples that even if your styles are very similar, you can still integrate contrast and make them harmonious with one another. So the last one is density. And by density, I mean whether or not those letters are really wide and spaced far apart, which is also known as expanded text, or whether they're really skinny and pushed tight together, which is typically referred to as condensed type. So I've got a few examples for that as well. With the verb up at the top, you can see that all the letters are really wide and pretty spaced apart, but they're still paired with other typefaces that are more condensed or narrow in nature. And it works really well because there's that great amount of contrast between the two, as well as scale with it being the largest text on the layout. And then you can see a couple other examples right there utilizing expanded and condensed text to tell your eye where to go and to make those pairings more pleasing to the eye. So tip number 2, the rest of these are going to go a little bit quicker than that one. So with legibility is important because no matter how beautiful your layout may be, if the message isn't easily read at first glance, the layout and the type pairings fail. No matter what you choose for your layout, when you're pairing text more than one typeface together, you want to make sure that your message is being read at first glance, at the very first instance. You don't want to give anyone a reason to move on to the next layout. You want to keep them captivated and focused on your message. So a few examples right here. You can see on the right side of the screen, that's definitely one of those typefaces that they want you to kind of spend a little time figuring out what it says. But most times that is not appropriate to use for layouts or type pairings. And then on the left side, you can see your eyes have to kind of strain to tell what's going on or what's being communicated right there. And that's never a good thing for readability or whenever you're trying to get an important message across. So my last tip is make it relevant. And why relevancy is important is if the type pairings that you choose feel out of place in relation to the message being communicated, everything becomes less effective. You want those type pairings that you choose to feel directly related to the message. So at first glance, what does it feel like? And does it feel like the words that it's communicating? So a couple of examples right here. You can see princess party on the left and on the right. So when you're thinking of a princess party, you can see Becky's turning 3. So for a 3-year-old's birthday party that's princess themed, you want it to feel very girly, very young, and energetic. And the example on the left is kind of circusy or even a little bit westerny, and that's not appropriate because it's got to feel more like a little girl's princess party. So you want to make sure that the type choices that you're choosing feel on message with the theme of your message. So another example is beautiful cakes. So on the left side, you can see there's a grunge style that's chosen, and grunge isn't typically thought of as being very beautiful, so it's not appropriate for the topic. There's always a time and a place for those kinds of styles, but this one would not be one of them. So even if the two type pairings right there feel really harmonious with each other, it's not the right place to use those type pairings if you're talking about beautiful cakes. Those type pairings should be saved for something else. As you can see on the right side, that's far more effective because it feels just like the message that's being communicated. So let's recap everything we just went over. So 3 simple tips for pairing type. Number 1 is apply contrast. When you're choosing your typefaces, make sure that there's always contrast between them, whether it's color, scale, density, shape. We went through them all. So just make sure that they're not so closely related that your eye doesn't know where to go. It gets a little confused if things are too similar. So always make sure you have contrast there. Number 2, check legibility. Make sure everything's readable at very first glance. And number 3, make it relevant. Make sure your type choices feel the same as the message. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe. I release a new design or lettering tutorial every single Tuesday. And don't forget to head on over to my blog, every-tuesday.com, for even more design tutorials and a bunch of design freebies. You can also see examples of my own typography and lettering work on my Instagram at Every Tuesday. And finally, my course on font making, learning how to convert your hand lettering into a font, which all these tips can be directly related to lettering. When you're creating layouts for clients with lettering styles, you can integrate these same exact tips into that. And if you'd ever like to convert your hand lettering into a workable font, I have an entire course. I only open it a very limited number of times per year, and the last opening of this year is happening next week. So make sure to head on over to every-tuesday.com/font-making, and you can get on the list and you'll get an email from me when that opens up. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week.